Welcome to the Children's Book Author Podcast. I'm your host, Eleanor Page. If you write for children, or it's always been your dream to, you're in the right place. As the children's book author, I'm on a quest to discover everything there is about writing, publishing, and marketing children's books, as well as how to supercharge my creativity, skyrocket my productivity, and absolutely everything else there is to know about how to be the best, so you can be too. Join me as I interview fabulous guests and become the children's book author. Welcome back to the Children's Book Author Podcast with me, Eleanor Page. We're up to episode 6. And today we talk all about overcoming writing challenges with Colleen M story. I know I'm so biased, but I do think that I actually pick the best people on the planet to chat with on this podcast, and Colleen is no exception. She was amazing. She's a novelist, a freelance writer, a writing coach, and oh my gosh, her books are outstanding. She gives all of her love and heart to them, and I truly believe that she loves helping authors in such a vibrant, genuine, and down-to-earth way. I have read all of her nonfiction books, and I do encourage you to do the same, some of which I'm thinking off the top of my mind. Your Writing Matters, Writer Get Noticed, and Overwhelmed Writer Rescue. I do have a memory. I do. I remember that off the top of my head. And gosh, we just got into so many things that are going to make your writing better, easier, more delightful, that's going to make you a healthy writer, not an unhealthy writer, which is common in the writing world. And gosh, she's just so motivational. I just felt amazing after walking away from this interview. You can overcome your challenges. We all have them. I have so many, I can't tell you. I am the worst procrastinator in the world. And actually, one of Colleen's tips that's stayed with me so much is never, ever have your telephone in the same room with you when you write. And yeah, I was on the other side of the room, but when it left the room, my life became so much better. My creativity increased substantially. So just, things like that you're going to learn from Colleen that are going to make your writing journey a healthy, pleasurable, joyful one, rather than being a creative who wants to pull your eyeballs out. No, we don't want that. So jump into this interview. I hope you enjoy it thoroughly. If you love it, do go leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and tune in for the next episode where you get to learn a little bit more every time about how to become the children's book author. Today I welcome to the show Colleen Story, writer, speaker, storyteller. Colleen writes mainstream fiction with a supernatural twist and non-fiction books that help writers succeed. And that's where I discovered Colleen from. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Elena. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So tell me a little bit about your personal creative journey and how you got started and ended up knowing so much about the creative journey and the obstacles that creatives run into.
Well, probably I should start at the beginning where when you ask that question, I think a lot of people want to know, did you always want to write? And for me, I always enjoyed writing, but I wasn't one of those kids who was making books and, dreamed of being a writer when I got older. My first love was music. When I was 5, I was begging my mom for a piano. And so she got me one of those little toy pianos, with 16 keys on it or something. And within a couple of weeks, I was pretending to play the keys that weren't on the piano, that were beyond it. So she's like, okay, I guess we better get a real piano. She's serious about this. And I spent most of all of my schooling and all the way through college studying music. And during that time, I loved to write. I journaled, I read like crazy, And whenever the teacher announced writing test, I was like, yeah, because I knew I could ace those better than the multiple choice ones. But the idea to write didn't hit me until I got out of college. I had my degree and I moved to a different state and had a little time to think. And for some reason, the writing bug bit me right then. It was just like this thing that seemed to come out of nowhere, and suddenly I wanted to try to write stories. And so I took the time that I had, excuse me, to do that. I had a short time that I didn't have to work full time, only had to work part time, and I really started practicing writing stories. And I felt like this was me. This was just kind of where I fit. And I had always loved music and still love music. I still play in the symphony. I still teach lessons, but the writing was where it was at. And so I wrote on my own, and within a couple of years, I got a job as a copywriter for a company and kind of changed my whole career around. And so that was over 20 years ago. I have been a health writer ever since then. I worked for that company for about 3 years and then went out on my own. And I've been a freelance writer since then, mainly health and wellness subjects, and at the same time, writing novels on the side, writing novels, stories, books on the side. And when I got my first publishing contract, of course, as we're all told, you need to set up your blog, you need to start trying to get an audience. I didn't know anything about doing any of that at that point. That was in 2015 that first novel came out. And so it was before that. It took a couple years for it to come out. So it was around 13 that I started blogging and trying to figure all that out. And I hadn't done much of that before. And so I think my own journey of learning creativity, of struggling to be a novelist, of being a professional writer at the same time, has informed me the most. And when I finally found my niche in my author platform, which is my website, Writing and Wellness, I started interviewing other authors. And I've now interviewed over about 350 now, and still going. And I started hearing from other authors about their struggles, what they were having trouble with, and found that so many of the things they were struggling with, I had struggled with also. Meanwhile, I was writing and researching on creativity and self-doubt and overcoming the struggles that we writers have. So I think it's just an amass of time and research and talking with other writers. I lead workshops now with them that has kind of informed where I'm at now to where I hope to be able to help other writers on their journeys.
Well, I found you by reading your book. I'm looking down at the name so I don't butcher it. Overwhelmed Writer Rescue. And when I read that book, I'm like, this woman's in my head. Like, she knows exactly how I'm feeling about everything. And I couldn't put it down. Like, I sort of devoured it. And you had such a magnificent mix of, like, you've walked the journey, and yet you also had like immaculate research, like that you really blended the two. And I felt very comforted, like there was hope. I could change. I could be healed, because all that part of me that like there's this one paragraph, if I can just say it, actually quote it, because I wrote it down. You said, each time you have a few minutes to write and you don't write, it's not because you failed to prioritize, but because you gave in to fear. Boom. Like, that hit me so hard. I thought that is exactly what's going on here. Can you talk a bit about that? Just make me feel that I'm not the only one. that's feeling this way.
Definitely not the only one. And when you read that, I remember my own struggle and the struggle that continues to this day. I would say, when we talk about fear, it pervades every part of a writer's life. I would almost say, if something's not going right in your writing career, look at fear, because it's probably at the base of it. We come up against that fear on the blank page. We come up against it when we're trying to build a platform. We come up against it when we're trying to submit our work. it is always there for a writer, and it's always something we have to overcome. And I think when we realize that at a conscious level, and we can say, oh, this is fear talking. This is because I'm afraid whatever I put down is not going to be any good. And we forget that the awesome thing about writing, and me as a musician, I love this because I play French horn, and when you have a French horn solo in the symphony, I mean, if you don't get it right on the night of the concert, that's it. You've blown it. You're toast. As a writer, you can go back and work on that. You can go back and fix that. And I love that about it. You can just, create on the page, have fun on the page, and then you can always go back and fix it. Nobody has to see it. But we all, for some reason, have to remind ourselves of that over and over again. I know even me personally, I'm working on my next novel now. I have to remind myself it's time to write, and I feel that fear and, that what Stephen Pressfield, the great author who wrote The War of Art, anybody who hasn't read that, read that. You feel that fear and that resistance. Why? I'm not sure. It's like, especially after 20-some years of writing, why is this still there? It's still there. I try to tell the writers, it's there. Just accept it. It's there. It's probably always going to be there. It's never going to be something you can leave behind. So you have to constantly remind yourself, I need courage. I must be courageous today to overcome this. Remember, I don't have to show this to anybody. I can just write and then decide after that if I'm going to show it, if I'm going to work on it, what I'm going to do. I think the other thing that helps with fear is to remember why we write in the first place, which is because we like it. It's fun. It's like once you get past that initial fear, that initial obstacle that you've got to overcome, and you get into the writing, oh, then we're having fun, right? Then we're typing, we're in that dream world, that's where we'd like to be. And so it helps to remind us, okay, once I get into it, I'm going to enjoy it. The fear will go away, but I've got to overcome this obstacle to begin with. Fear, like I say, if anything's not going right in your career, if you're not getting your writing done, if you're not building your platform, anything that's not happening that you wish would happen, it's probably because fear's in there stopping you.
Whoa, that's big, especially when you just pulled it out to not just the writing, but the platform building. Like it's always going to be fear underlying it.
Well, and the platform building perhaps even more so, because then you're putting yourself out there, right? There's even more to be afraid of. There's the fear that maybe readers won't like this, or maybe I won't be able to connect to my readers, or all these things that might not work the way I want them to. And the thing that pushing yourself past that again and again and again teaches you is that it's okay if it's not perfect the first time. If it's okay if you put something out there and it doesn't work perfectly. You can try it again. You can put something else out there. I'm always amazed when I'm putting content out there for my platform, on my blog or on my videos or anything like that, which ones connect with people and which ones don't. I'll think I have a great idea and I'll put it out there and nobody cares. And then something else that I just kind of thought was simple, everybody loves. So you have to learn by continually doing it, but every time, like you say, we have to come up against and overcome that fear. Anything you can put up in your writing nook that represents courage to you is a good thing to do. That picture, I don't know if you've seen it, where the cat's looking in the mirror and sees the lion. That's one of my favorites. Just something to remind you, okay, I got to tap into my courage.
Yeah, I love that. Tap into my courage. Because we all have that. And most writers, I think, or maybe I'm just talking about me now, but we often go, we don't have time. I don't have the time. And since I've gone full-time writing, I actually have lots of time. So I can't use that excuse anymore. But it's often the thing, isn't it, that people are saying they don't have enough time, but everybody can find some time. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, that not having time, what that is a symptom of is not setting priorities, because all of us are super busy. There's a million things we have to do, particularly writers. I mean, we not only have to write, edit, produce our material, we need to market, social media, advertise, get all the, we're overloaded. Plus, most of us have day jobs, families to take care of, etc. So it's really easy to say I don't have time, and nobody's going to argue with you because everybody knows time is short for everybody. So what that really is just a symptom of not setting priorities. You have to, and again, this is something I have to come back and do myself time and time again. Come back and say, what are my priorities, and am I paying attention to those? I mean, last year during the COVID-19 pandemic, whenever you could kind of feel everybody's emotions kind of going downward, and I found in my own writing practice that I was kind of ignoring my writing part. I was doing all the platform building part, but my novel work was kind of, going off at the side. And I had to take a step back and say, am I keeping my priorities straight here, or am I not? And I kind of try to do that with myself regularly. What are my top 3 priorities that I want to make sure I'm getting done, that are most important to me in my life? And another reason that's so important is because studies have found that we love busy work. We, complain about it. We don't want to do filing and dishes and all that extra stuff that we all have to do every day, but we will do it first before we will write or before we will do anything that we say matters to us, because doing busy work is easier and it makes us feel like we've accomplished something. So it's really easy to lose track of what our priorities are and just say, oh, well, I got into doing all this and I didn't have time. Reset your priorities and make sure that you're making time for what's important to you.
Yeah, and I found it really hard to prioritize it for a few years there, especially when the books weren't making money. They were actually costing money. So I started thinking, maybe this is just a make-believe thing in my head, like I've written this thing, that's not even, it's just fiction. Is that a real thing? And then you put it out there and nobody finds it because I didn't market it. Of course, now I know that. And then I think, well, how do I prioritize that?
Yeah, and most of us didn't know that to start with. I didn't either. And most of us don't understand the time that it takes to build up a readership. And so we're not working that platform at the same time that we're learning how to write. And in a way, that's kind of how it should be. We need to take several years at the beginning just to learn how to write, learn how to create a story. I mean, that takes time and effort and education and all those things. And so expecting that we're going to be able to build a platform at the same time is kind of expecting too much, I think. I think some writers are able to do that, and kudos to them. But for most of us, I think that is a little more than we can bite off at one time. So I think all of us end up, when we get that first book and it's ready to go, oh, geez, now, I got to build a platform. And so it's totally common to have those first, 1, 2, however many books not selling the best because we simply haven't been able to invest the time into building the platform. And I would tell any writers out there, if this is happening to you, please don't think that it's because your stuff isn't good enough or your work is not up to speed. As long as you did everything you could to make that story the best it could be, it probably just might be that you haven't had the time and the investment to put into your platform.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Do you know, I remember with one of my books, what happened was it's a really niche. It's actually a series. It's called Meditation Adventures for Kids, and it's really niche, right? And everyone will be like, that's kind of weird, it won't sell.
Oh.
So, I throw it up there, and what happened was Amazon made some sort of mistake. I don't know what mistake it was or what exactly happened, but it started getting 10,000 downloads, the first book, 10,000 free downloads a week. And then as a result of that, it started getting 100 paperback sales per week. Anyways, Amazon then went, whoa, what's going on here? And they pulled it for some reason, and it killed that whole thing. Oh. And anyway, it went back to not selling very much. But the lesson it taught me was that if enough people see it, if out of that 10,000, which is a lot, there were 100 who were the right audience. So the audience for something always exists. It's just about finding them.
Such a good point, Elena. Such a good point, because you're smart on. And so many of us that are writing, especially if we're small indie authors, if we're publishing on our own, we're working with small indie publishers, there simply isn't that machine to get word out there about the work that we're doing. And so it's a matter, like you say, you get something lucky like that happen, you're like, oh yeah, okay. So now I realize it's not because my work isn't good enough. So I'm really glad that happened to you, because that illustrates it perfectly.
And I mean, it was my first book, and it's really not that good. But with kids, I find and even adults, I'm guessing, there's always an audience, even for your really early work. Yeah, but it's just, I mean, look, packaging, of course, is important, and all of that wonderful stuff, I think, and all that was done well. But it was just that belief that I had that this is just too weird and will never sell. Yeah, and you talk about some saboteurs that you mentioned 7, actually, saboteurs to productivity, and in some ways I think they're even to sharing your work, right? And belief systems is one of them. I bet that's probably a biggie.
Well, and we think that we have to believe that our work is great to be able to succeed. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, some of the studies I have reviewed for that section of the book, and I'm reaching back in my memory like we talked, this was 4 years ago that I wrote this one. But from what I remember, they had found that trying to make yourself believe something doesn't really work. I mean, we're often told to speak affirmations or put notes up on the window that say, I am a best-selling author. That's all fine, but a lot of people don't find that really effective. And according to the research they've done, the reason why is that the real way to build belief is just to do it, get it out there, do the work, and then realize after you've done the work that, hey, I did that. I can do this. It's kind of like push all the way to the end of the book, write the end, then you'll believe that you can write a book. You don't have to believe you can before you actually do it. And I think sometimes we let that hold us back. That can be, like you say, a saboteur to our success, because we think we have to believe that we can be these amazing writers before we can actually be them. Not necessarily true. And that kind of goes against a lot of the New Age way of thinking right now. And I'm not knocking belief. Belief is a great thing to have. If you believe in yourself, that's awesome. But if you don't, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get where you want to go. If you are willing to put in the work and educate yourself and get your work out there, the belief will come. With each milestone that you surpass, you will gradually teach yourself that, hey, I can do this. Look at this. Look at where I've been so far. And sometimes the best thing to do is just to look back on your accomplishments and say, yeah, look where I started and look where I am now. And I need to believe in myself at this point.
I love that. That is so powerful. So belief on its own is nothing without the action. I mean, the action is what creates more of that. As you say, it was a really in thing, wasn't it? People would put sticky notes on their bathroom mirrors and just say it out loud. And I know, some friends would write themselves checks for $1 million and think it's now going to come. That was really in at one point.
Yes. Well, and I don't think that's necessarily bad. I mean, if you can kind of train your brain to start thinking along those lines, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing to do, because the more that you can focus your brain on what you want to accomplish, the better, because then you'll start thinking of ways you can do that. But to imagine that you can simply say, I believe I'm a best-selling author, and then it's going to come true, most people know that's probably not going to happen. And so they have a hard time when they put that note up, or they write themselves that check. There's part of them going, yeah, right, that's not going to happen. And so we can get past that part of us, that reality check part, by just saying, okay, I'm going to prove to myself with every action I take every day that this can happen. I think maybe a combination of the two is the best way to go.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Definitely. So let's talk a little bit about focus. Because, I make the time, I sit down, I have my...
Can I interrupt you?
My cup. Yeah, go for it.
Before we jump on, you talked about the 7 saboteurs, and there's one other in there I would like to tackle, which is self-doubt.
Yeah, please. Yes, tackle them all, tackle away.
I want to follow the way you want to go, but self-doubt is such a huge, humongous issue for authors. And that is one of the 7, and probably the biggest one of the 7, that is so
I think
important.
I left it. I think I just wanted to get away from it so we didn't have to talk about my self-doubt, Colleen. But thank you for coming back to it. Because you see me. I love that you see me. Keep talking.
Well, like I say, I've interviewed nearly 350 writers now, and very few of them haven't mentioned it. Self-doubt, I think, is the biggest saboteur. It will stop you. It will slow you down. It will keep you from reaching your dreams. And I say this from personal experience. And I tell people when I do workshops on self-doubt that I started writing novels in the early 2000s. I didn't get my first publishing contract till 2013, 14, whatever it was. It took me that long because of self-doubt. You know, this constant in the back of your mind, this is crap. Why do I think I can be a writer? What I'm writing is no good. Nobody's going to want to read this. This constant voice in the back of our heads that I've since heard that most all writers deal with, and not only writers, but artists of all sorts. And if we allow this self-doubt to stop us, it definitely will. And I see it do it to writers every day. And it kind of breaks my heart. So it's one of the reasons I want to make sure that we hit on that one. And my solution for that is to tell people self-doubt is not the truth. It is a habit. It's just a way of thinking. Somewhere in our growing up years, in our childhood years, we learned to think that if something didn't turn out the way that we thought it should, it was our fault. We blame ourselves. And it's very common for children to do this with most anything. Mom and dad are fighting, it's my fault. I'm getting bullied at school, it's my fault. We have this way of thinking so that when we grow up and we are writing and we send a piece of writing out and it's rejected, okay, it must be because the writing is no good. It's like this habit of a habitual way of thinking. So I try to tell writers, imagine yourself as a rat in a maze. And every time you're triggered, you get a rejection. An editor has a comment on your writing that makes you feel like your stuff is no good. Somebody gives you a poor review. It triggers that habitual way of thinking. And around the maze you go. Oh, I'm not good enough. This is because my stuff isn't any good. I shouldn't be doing this. Whoever thought, why did I ever think I could be a writer? We have to interrupt that habitual way of thinking to be able to change it. And the way that we do that is to say, stop, this is my habit talking. This isn't the truth. And we think it's the truth. It's our thoughts. Okay, well, I got this rejection. The story must not be any good. It seems like the truth. It makes sense. But it's not. It's this habitual way of thinking. So we have to say, okay, wait a minute. This habit of mine, I'm going to break it. The way we break it is by taking action. So if you got a rejection, you submit the story again. Or maybe you get help from an editor to help you improve it or improve your query, whatever you need to do. You get a comment from an editor that you're worried about, go work on that area she's recommended needed help. Once you start doing it, you'll realize, yes, I can fix this. This is okay. Take action towards your goal, whatever it is, and that self-doubt will start to recede. But my hope is that writers do not accept it as the truth and do not let it slow you down or stop you.
And I bet it does stop us, doesn't it? It does stop so many of us. Mm-hmm. I think it stopped me lots of times. I definitely inherited the I'm not good enough gene. That's what I call it, the I'm not good enough. And then I started saying to that voice in my head, good enough according to who? That was like the comeback. So according to who are you not good enough? Like to the kid who's going to read the book, to the editor, to how many people, whose voice, that definitely helped me overcome it. But I think it's a bit like the fear, like you said, it does crop up time and time again. Just even as you go to the next level of your development, there it is waiting. Now you're not good enough at this level.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, or you're not good enough for whatever publisher you're going for, or whatever agent you're submitting to, or whatever readership you're hoping to garner. It's like you say, every level there's self-doubt waiting for you. So we have to remember, and I still, at least now I've gotten to the point where I can catch the thoughts. When the thoughts start cropping up, I can catch them. and say, okay, wait, this isn't what this is. It's not that you're not good enough. And there's like a big relief that comes with that.
Yeah, that's so strong. Like, catch your thoughts and then you can go, aha. I remember years ago, I used to start feeling, like rubbish in the afternoon and wondered why. And then it occurred to me, did I think something in the morning? Like one little interaction could have happened. Or like you said, I read that one review and I dismissed it at the time. But meanwhile, it sat there and kind of festered at the back of my brain. And then it would, until my emotions would come crashing down later in the day. And it wasn't until I recognized there was a link that I started to break some of those links. And like you said, it's just a habit.
That's such a good point, because every time it's like that. And oftentimes we don't really remember. It's like you say, you have to kind of go back and say, what was it that caused me to feel this way? What was it that triggered this? And you can usually find it. I don't think there's ever been a time that I haven't been able to find it. But like you say, oh yeah, so-and-so said this, or I read this, or something happened that made me feel this way. Yeah, exactly. You've got it.
Yeah, and in Australian culture, I don't know if it's like this in the US, but I know I have been to the US once, and in the US, I felt like I could be a bit braggy, like I could kind of be like, I created this character, and everyone was like, wow, go you. Whereas in Australia, if I go, I created this character, everyone's like, oh, aren't you like a show off? Like we talk
really?
ourselves down.
Right.
Yeah, like it's really a thing. Like you don't sort of brag, or kind of like you don't walk around going, I'm a great writer. You sort of go, no, I'm not very good. And then everyone says, oh, no, yes, you are. Like that's sort of the, do you know, like the way that it's supposed to roll. So that it's just silly.
Kind of sits in your brain that this is what you're supposed to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just being confident enough. I've learned to be able to say nice things to myself, and you don't have to say them out loud to everybody else, but at least to myself I can. Yeah.
One thing I've read in studies that helps with that is to talk to yourself in third person, which I know when we hear people do that, we think, well, that's kind of odd. But if you talk to yourself in third person to build yourself up, actually really works. I mean, studies have really found this. They found this in athletes, like before they go out to the big game. Colleen's going to go out there and shoot the three-pointer or whatever. Doing that third-person thing really works. So something to try.
Really? I'm so going to do that when I... Yeah. Like, I may actually try that when I pick my kids up from school today and watch their expressions. They'll be like, what is she doing now? She's come up with something new.
I have to tell you this story. I was taking motorcycle riding classes once. For my last novel, the main character was a motorcycle rider, and so I got to learn how to do this. Plus, I just wanted to. And they trained us for a week, and then we had to take this riding skills test. And whether or not you passed that test was whether or not you got, approved to be able to ride on your license. So they had taught us over and over and over how to do curves and turns, corners, turns, go round in a circle, turn this way, turn that way, these big, wide circles. Then they spent like 10 minutes teaching us how to go through these cones. And you had to go really slow, and we hadn't been going that slow, and you had to inch in and out of these cones and then turn around and inch back between them, like a 8 kind of pattern like the skiers do in a way, but they were so close together that you had to stay in like first gear, second gear maybe. And so that was super hard for me because you were worried about tipping over the motorcycle, right? So every time, we only had like 3 times to practice it. I don't know why they did it this way, but every time I practiced it, I didn't get it. I had to put my foot down or whatever, and if you had to do that, you didn't pass the test. So right before the actual test, I'm looking at those cones, and I had to do this. Colleen, you can do this. You can do this. Really concentrate. You can do this. And by golly, it worked. I went out there and did it, and I got my license. It's like, I was so shocked because I had never done it in practice, but I was able to do it. And I was totally new to motorcycles. I'd never ridden them before. So it works. And I think there's a way that it can work in writing too, or if you're going to do a signing, or if you're going to present a workshop and you're nervous or something. I definitely tell people to try it.
Yeah, that's such a good story. And I love that you failed every time you were trying it, but then when you sat yourself down and said, Colleen, listen here, you can do this. It's almost like sort of mothering yourself a bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like going, come on, I got your back here. And I think, from 20 years of counselling, the one thing I found myself telling every person who came in and mainly said, such and such doesn't support me, I would always say, but do you support you? Because that's actually more important than if your mum, dad, husband, children support you. Do you support you? And that's what that feels like when you speak to yourself like that.
It's so true. And that applies to, that's a whole new area of writing, because I hear from writers all the time whose their family or their friends or their spouse doesn't support their writing dreams. And too often they let that kill the dream. That just breaks my heart when I hear that. And it's like you say, if you have to support yourself. I hear from so many writers that their families are usually the last ones to read their books. I don't know how your family fares with that, but I hear from writers all the time, families, they kind of know you in a different way and aren't necessarily going to sit down and read your work. And for many writers, that's really a knife in the heart. It's really hard for them. They're not supporting me. Well, not necessarily that they aren't supporting you, but it can be a difficult thing for them to realize that this is the way it is. And maybe my best friend doesn't really care to read my book. And it's like you say, as long as we support ourselves, we are our own best cheerleaders.
Yeah, that's really powerful, I think, for people to hear that, because I see that a lot in the forums. People get really upset about other people not supporting their dream. When I used to record meditation CDs. That's how I sort of started off in the world of publishing. And whenever I'd give any to family or friends, actually 3 out of 5 of them would all say, "Oh, thanks, we need a new coaster." And I would be like, "A coaster? Are you serious?" Yeah, it was like I know, right? So, and it was like, oh, but that made me sort of tougher. It made me say, "Hey, they're not my audience." Like meditation CD is a little bit of a specialized, thing. You have to really want to listen to it. So yeah,
true. Yeah, but oh my gosh, that does hurt, doesn't it? Oh, jeez.
A coaster. So there's all these meditation CDs around the world that are being used as coasters. I feel quite proud.
Well, you never know who might see them, right? And then we'll actually want to use them as a meditation CD. So it's a marketing technique.
Yes, it is. Very expensive marketing technique. Okay, so you talked about the 2 of them. I'm just going to spit out the rest and see if there's any others that really jump at you want to make a comment on. So writer's guilt, definitely had that one a lot. Dis-ease, self-doubt we talked about. Perfectionism, that would have to be a biggie. Workaholism, goal setting, and beliefs we also touched upon. Is there any of those that you've got something really important to say?
I think the next one that I hear that seems to sabotage most writers is the destructive goal setting, because it can so often lead to disappointment. Most of us, when we start out, have these lofty goals. I'm going to get published by HarperCollins, or I'm going to write the next great, novel that's going to be a bestseller. I'm going to get my article placed in the New Yorker. We have these really big goals. And often they just set us up for disappointment, simply because we're coming from a place of not understanding the enormity of the goals we're setting. It's kind of like saying, I'm going to join NASA and go to the moon. You have a handful of people out of hundreds of thousands that apply to NASA that end up actually going to the moon. The difference being that most people who apply to NASA who have that goal understand that. They know this is really, really rare. And so then if it doesn't happen, they don't see themselves as failures. Whereas writers write that first novel, send it out, hoping for that big agent, that big publisher. When it doesn't happen, oftentimes end up feeling like failures. So I would just remind writers that these lofty goals are really huge, giant things to accomplish. And the people that we see that have accomplished them, we see them all the time, then we think, okay, well, I want to be them. We need to understand what a distance there is between starting writing or even after you've done writing for 5 years or even 10 years, that the apprenticeship, the time that it takes, the learning that it takes, how much you have to practice, the skills you have to gain to get to that point. It takes a lot of time, a lot of practice, a lot of education to get there, just to realize that, not that you can't reach those goals, but just to realize how big those goals are, and that it's usually better for your motivation and your energy to set smaller goals along the way. So let's just get this first book published and in the best way possible so that I feel proud of it. That's a great first novel goal, first book goal. Then maybe with the next one, I would like to reach a few more readers. Let me see if I can have a better book launch this time than I did last time. By the third book, maybe by then an agent would be interested. Now, there's people are going to say, well, I know so-and-so who got an agent and got a contract with Simon & Schuster first time out. Yes, those things happen, but they're extremely rare. So just understand that so that you're setting smaller goals for yourself. And then you can feel like when you hit those goals, okay, that feels good, it feels motivating, gives you the energy to keep going, rather than feeling when you don't hit that goal that you failed somehow, you didn't do very well, and that brings you down, which you don't want.
Yeah, I did not think you were going to pick that one. And then when you did and you started talking, I'm like, she knows me again.
Oh, no.
How does she know me so well? For me, it's mostly like last year was, I'm going to write 6 books, and I put it everywhere on all my social, on all my social media. It was going to be my most creative year ever. And then COVID hit and I didn't write a single one because I was homeschooling, and I was like, oh my Lord, I actually shared that everywhere. Like, put that everywhere. So it's that thing.
Everywhere though, yeah.
Yeah, it's just that over goal setting. And I think also like goal setting without having a system to make it happen. Like I didn't sort of lay it out and go, you know what, I have a system for making those goals happen. I just sort of made the goals and thought that magically. I would get my act. Yeah. Like I would just be prolific last year, just suddenly. Just double my book output because why not? That's what I decided I wanted. And it was a recipe for feeling really bad about myself, like you said. So,
and such a good point as far as, then you have to put in place the plan for getting there. And I think you can never really set too small a goal. I mean, some people say be careful not to shoot too small. But I don't know, you shoot small and you reach that goal, then you can go to the next one. That is motivating to me, that you achieve that next one and that motivates you to go to the next one. So maybe if you wanted to write 6 books in a year, then you'd say, okay, so that means I've got to have a book done every 2 months. That might have made you see how lofty an ambition that was to say, oh, a book every 2 months, okay. But then when you start laying that out, then you say, okay, so that I need to have so many words done per week. The draft needs to be done by such and such a week. You get your calendar, you lay it out just like you say. That really can be very helpful, not only in helping you see whether or not this is an appropriate goal, but then helping you to actually lay in a plan to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go back to focus, because I'm not letting you get away without this one. Because as I said, I sit down at my desk, I've made the time, I've got my special drink, and then I go, la, 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 oh, bird flying past. Oh, maybe I should journal. Actually, let me just check all those things. How do you sort of focus? And also, I know you speak about finding your peak creative time, like the time where you might be the most creative. Is that part of the answer?
Yes and no. On the focus, and I'm glad you came back to that, because that is a huge issue and it's only getting worse. And I'm sure everybody knows why. It's because of our cell phones and our internet and all the distractions that we have in our lives today that we didn't used to. And so I find this even in myself. We are used to having something to entertain us 24/7. We can turn to something that makes it so we don't have to focus. We can consume media instead of creating it. And there are two different things that require different types of brain processes. The creating part, you have to kind of push your brain to do because it's a little harder, but then once you do it, it's so much more rewarding. The consuming part is a lot easier to do, but it's so much less rewarding. We all know after we've, binge watched a show, okay, it might have been fun, but we don't really feel that great after 5 or 6 hours of doing that. But if we concentrate and create a chapter of a story or a short story, when we get done with that, that feels awesome, but it's a little harder to get into. Focus, there's studies after studies about this now because it's become such an issue because we're all so distracted. We're allowing ourselves to be distracted. I think the first step is to realize that we're all suffering from this. This is an issue for all of us, and it's really real. I mean, we can pay lip service to it and say, oh yeah, I know, I'm always thinking about what texts I got or if I got any likes on my social media feeds. But it's really real because I challenge people to sit down for 5 minutes and do nothing and see if you can do that without reaching for the phone or wanting to get on the internet or wanting to check your Facebook feed. It's really hard for us now because we kind of have programmed our brains for this. And our brains, and people at Facebook and Twitter and all these places are really smart because they know how our brains work. And every time we get a message, we get an email, we get a like, we get a retweet, it hits dopamine in our brains, which is what makes us feel good. It's that neurotransmitter in the brain that makes us feel good. So the more that we get those hits, it's kind of like a gambler, the more we want. So we're training our brains to continually go back to this and want more of those hits of dopamine because they feel good. It's like this cycle, and it's really tough to break, but it's something we need to break to be able to actually focus on our work. What you say when you sit down, you've planned it all, you've got this ritual, you're ready to write, and then your brain just isn't there with you. It's not wanting to do it. There's a couple of things you can do. One, I would say make it a habit. Sit down at the very same time every day if you can, every other day, whatever your schedule is. Go through the same ritual, like you said. You get your tea, you get your whatever you have, you're sitting in the same place. And don't let yourself do anything else for that time. Do that consistently to help yourself build the habit of writing again, of focusing on something. Then turn everything else off and put your phone in the other room. They have found that the phone... Even the
my
fact
phone in the other room?
In the other room.
Did you say, put my phone in the other room?
Ah, we found the problem. Even the presence of the phone, and I've read studies on this recently, even the fact that it's there. I mean, they did this experiment and they found that even just it sitting there, the participants didn't look at it, they didn't check it, but they did brain scans on these participants while they were doing this experiment. They were still, their attention was still divided because they were still thinking about, oh, I wonder if that post I put up, how many retweets it got. I wonder if I got an email back from so-and-so. The brain is still distracted. And so as long as you have that distraction going, you can't sink in. We writers have to sink into that deep, world of our fiction, even nonfiction, to be able to focus. It's kind of like diving underwater. We're like whales. We need to dive under and get into that other place. We can't do that when the brain is divided. So yeah, you got to put the phone in the other room because otherwise you're just going to keep, thinking about it. Out of sight, somewhere you can't see it. Turn everything else off, no access to internet, and do this on a regular basis. Daily is what's best. Same time with the same ritual. One other thing that helps me to get into this is before I fiction write, I will read for 5 minutes from some of my favorite authors, from what I call master authors, the ones that I feel have something to teach me. And I'll just read a page. I have limits, so I'll read a page of the book. And reading a master author's work every time gets me into it because that reconnects me to my desire to be as good a writer as I can. So it helps me forget about everything else and get my brain into the focus of writing. Okay, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to be. Sit down and then I can write. Another thing that helps, of course, is to make sure you're not going to be interrupted. I have a lot of writers that tell me, I've got kids, they're interrupting me. You can put up a do not disturb on your door. If that doesn't work, get in your car, go drive somewhere. I have gotten some great writing done in my car. Just go drive somewhere, Where I live in Idaho in the winter, I live out in the country, and you can drive somewhere to where you see nothing around you but hills and snow. So you kind of feel like you're in Antarctica. There's nothing there to distract you. And I can get some amazing writing done that way.
Wow, all such good tips. And I take it on board that, especially when you said that even when it's in the room, that the study showed that your attention's still going there. That's crazy stuff, isn't it? Like
it's kind of scary too. I mean, we have to break this dopamine loop that's going on, and I think the first thing is just to realize we're kind of a little more tied to this than we realized that we were, and it's more of a physiological thing than it is a willpower thing. Anytime that you're faced with something that kind of is working on the neurotransmitters in your brain, it takes a little bit more effort to break that. So another thing I would say is just in general, have certain times of the day that you check your phone and otherwise leave it alone. The more you can create a habit that is not tied to it, the better you'll be able to focus when it comes time to write.
Yeah, I did used to turn it off in the morning, but then, I was a bit nervous because things might have happened at school or something like that. So now what I've been doing is using, it's built into the iPhone that you can make all these apps not be on from a certain time to a certain time. So I do that, and then the phone's on. So if there's something important, and it rarely rings anyway these days, let's be honest. If something happens, it can ring, but otherwise, and every time I go to reach for the email and it's not on, I have to actually override that it's on. I'm like, don't touch that button. Do not touch that button. I have to, almost reprimand myself. But it's interesting because at one point I wasn't bringing the phone into my writing room, and what I found would happen, very different experience. Like, you said you challenge people to sit for 5 minutes and do nothing. I would sit there and gaze into the distance and sort of just daydream. And then it almost like I'd settle into something a bit deeper. And then I would write from a brain of nothingness rather than now I've got a brain of somethingness that I've got to try to turn off. So that's so accurate.
And such a good point, because the brain needs that to be able to create. And another thing that I recommend writers do is take at least a half an hour a week to be bored. We don't allow boredom anymore. We turn to our phones to entertain us with any spare moment we have because we don't want to be bored. But being bored is part of emptying out the brain so that the brain will come up with the creative ideas. This is another study. They found when they tested people, the ones who did a boring activity prior to the experiment came up with much more creative ideas than the ones who did a more entertaining activity before the experiment. Take a half an hour at least a week. I tell people, go to the park with a notebook and sit by a tree and do nothing else. And like you say, I think for a lot of us it ends up being kind of rewarding, because we miss that kind of stare out the window, daydream time. That is part of what creativity is. It's kind of the emptying and the sinking into the underwater world so that we can then create. When we are bored, the brain is naturally going to want to entertain us. And so that's one of the best times to then, write a story, write a chapter. But we don't allow this anymore in our daily lives right now. We are so busy consuming. So taking a break away from it, going somewhere without the phone, and allowing yourself to be bored. And most people, when they first try this, are really uncomfortable. It just feels, you feel restless. This doesn't feel good. But allow yourself, it's almost like going through withdrawal, right? You got to allow yourself to feel those feelings, and then it'll calm, and then you can create.
Yeah, wow. I'm going to get back on that, and I challenge you all listeners to also do the same. I did used to do that, but I fell back onto the booze. It isn't the booze. It's like that, I fell, and it feels a bit like that. If you're an alcoholic, you can't ever drink again. I mean, we can't be like that with technology, but you have to be so self-disciplined to not go back to the bad habits like I did.
Well, I think that's a really good example. And
Yeah.
And we all
Let's
do
talk.
it. So you're not the only one for sure.
Sorry, Colleen. There's a bit of course, because we have a time gap, because we're on other sides of the world. We sometimes talk over each other, so apologies for that. Let's talk a little bit about platform building for creatives. That you can't just write the book, even if it's been traditionally published. You do have to go out and do some platform building.
Okay, so let's talk about what platform is first, in case anybody doesn't know. Your platform is how many people know you exist. That's the reason why publishers these days love publishing books by celebrities. They have a ready-made platform, meaning they have lots of people who know about them, who are interested in them. So when they come out with a book, those people are going to be interested in buying that book. That's a ready-made platform. For the rest of us, how many people are going to be interested? When your book comes out, how many people are going to be interested? That's your platform. So what we need to do is build a connection with readers. We need to attract them to us so that when we do have something come out, they will be interested in whatever that might be. This takes a lot of time, effort, and figuring out what your niche is. What do you have to offer that others would be interested in, that would help others, that would entertain others? Anything, gifts that you may have, you have to figure out how to bring those together into a platform that then will attract readers your way. If you are traditionally published or self-published, you must have a platform these days. In fact, I'm noticing now that publishers are asking for, what is your platform? When you submit a book, it used to be, decades ago, that you could submit a book and whatever the merits of the book were, then your publisher would then mark it and hope to get readership that way. In today's world, publishers want authors who already have platforms. The business has gotten to the point where they are relying on authors to bring the readers in. The huge book publishers may still do a little marketing for you, but they're spending most of their money on the authors they know already have an audience. That's where they're earning most of their money. So the smaller authors really have to do all of this pretty much on their own. So the difficulty is, what do I have to offer? I can put my book out there, but when people don't know you, they're not likely to read your book. They have found in surveys that most people will buy a book because of a friend or relative told them about it. That is the biggest recommendation. Or because, if it lands on a bestseller list or something, then they might notice it there. But we have to build a relationship with our readers. And marketing is essentially doing that over time. It's getting your readers to trust you, to trust that what you put out is going to be something that they're going to find valuable for whatever reason. The difficulty is in finding the niche, and that's why I wrote the book, Write or Get Noticed. It has all kinds of exercises in there to help you find what your niche is, so that you can then create a platform that reflects your strengths. And a lot of writers think, well, I write about, my book is about Victorian romance, so that's what my platform should be. Not necessarily. You can create a better niche for yourself by examining your personal strengths as well, other areas that you may have strengths in. Maybe you're really funny, so your platform would be have more of a comic element to it. Or maybe you're a traveler, so you might talk about areas around the world that make great first date locations, to tie that into your romance. There are so many ways to dig into your own personal strengths and what you write, and then be able to mesh them together to create a platform for yourself. I kind of hit gold, I would say, when I came up with my platform, which is writing and wellness. And really has nothing to do with my novels, but because I'm connecting with readers there, if I then come up with a novel, then I have readers that are interested in that novel simply because they now trust me and they know me. But for me, writing and wellness came together because I was interested in creativity and writing, together with my long history of being a wellness writer. And nobody else was doing that at the time. So when I came out with that niche, it really helped me to draw readers my way because I could help them in this niche. And that's the other thing I would say to readers looking to build a platform is to, once you've found your strengths and your niche, your focus needs to be on how you can serve readers. Too often authors are all about me. You know, here's my book, read my chapters, read, here's what I'm doing. Readers want to know what you can do for them. You know, the what's in it for me question. How can you help me? And that's where you look at your strengths and your niche and you say, how can I then serve my readers? The more that you do that in your platform, the more they will come to you.
Well, I've got some homework to do there, haven't I? That's yeah. How can I serve that group or that person? Should always be at the forefront. That's really terrific advice. Yeah, because we all want to be famous and rich. I mean, that's sort of an underlying sentence. If you've become an author, an illustrator, a creative, don't pretend you don't, people. Everybody deep down does. But we forget. Yeah, don't lie. I know, I can see you. Because I'll often have this conversation and others will be like, no, I don't. And I'm like, yes, you do. You do. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. But ultimately, deep down, it really is about service. Even if you're writing that thing.
I was just going to say, and what that does then, if you serve the reader, is you then make a connection. And I think in the end, we're all looking for that connection with readers. Like you say, you're exactly right. We all have these lofty dreams of being famous with our writing. But then when we get a writer or a reader like yourself that comes and said, I love this book. It really helped me. I mean, gosh, that's where it's at. That's what we love. Yeah. That's what we want to hear. And that's the connection that we're forming through our platform. So it's kind of like when you get that connection and you start hearing that from readers, kind of all those worries about being rich and famous float away because you feel so fulfilled with that.
Yeah, that's perfect. That is exactly what happens. And they're not just pretend little likes on Facebook or Instagram. They're like someone's really, it's not just the glossy. They've really connected with the material that came from someplace in your soul or your heart, isn't it? And then you feel so alive from that connection.
Oh, it's the best feeling ever, for sure. Yeah, so if you can go...
You've got a new book. Oh, sorry, finish what you're saying first before I jump onto the next topic again.
Sorry, I was just going to say, if you go into your platform building with that in mind, it can really help you to succeed a lot faster than thinking, how can I make people interested in my book? Think instead, how can I combine my strengths in a way to help readers that would be interested in my book? And then you'll start making those connections.
Yeah. Well, that's another one that's going to have to go on the wall right next to fear and all those other good things that you said. That one's a big sticky note. I can see that one now. Every time I get distracted, I'll be like, nope, not about you. Are you helping somebody? Yes, you are. No, you're not. Get out of there. Yeah. You just put it so perfectly. I'm glad that you added that sentence because it just wrapped it up beautifully. So let's talk about your new book. Tell me about that. You've got a new one that's coming out later this year. Is it this year?
Yes, and you're the first one that I'm telling about it. I haven't talked about it publicly until now. I wasn't sure what the release schedule would be. Like you said about how last year was, and I was working on it all through last year, finished the draft last year, but then I really wasn't sure about when I would get it, edited and completed and out there. And as the year changed, it just felt like, my energy picked up. The editor I work with happened to have an opening to be able to edit the book, and things just started falling in place. So now I am shooting for a June or July release this year. I'm really excited about it. The title is Your Writing Matters. How to Banish Self-Doubt, Trust Yourself, and Go the Distance is the subtitle. And I wrote this book because I had so many writers come up to me at workshops and email me and say, I've been writing, I've been marketing, things aren't going as well as I hoped. I don't have a lot of readers. people aren't really paying attention to what I'm doing. I'm discouraged, I'm frustrated. I don't know if my writing even matters. And when I hear that, it breaks my heart. Okay, I have to address this. And that's why I titled the book, Your Writing Matters, No Matter What. My hope is through this book to help writers understand why we question ourselves. Why do we feel if the book isn't selling thousands of copies, if we're not rolling in the cash, if we're not on the talk shows talking about our books, that somehow our writing doesn't matter? Why do we feel that way? And I'm talking about society, culture's expectations, the way things are in our world today. We don't live in a vacuum, and there are many reasons why we feel this way. It's not just us. There are many factors working against this idea that creativity is valuable for creativity's sake. I mean, some people will give lip service to that, but we don't see messages confirming that around us, especially as adults. So I go through why we feel this way, all the factors that involved in that, and then a section of how does writing benefit you in your life? And I take the reader through a lot of different ways they may not have thought about before, about how beneficial writing is in so many ways. Physical health, mental health, emotional health, our creative well-being. And then at the end of the book, ask the writer to make the decision. Am I a writer for life or not? You know, is this me? Is this in my DNA or not? And at the very end, whatever decision you make, if you make the decision to be a writer, then you decide writing matters. It matters in my life, no matter what. By then, they'll know why. They'll be able to manage the difficulties that they may come up against. That is my hope anyway for the book.
Oh, that's magnificent. And that at the end you decide, I think I read something similar on one of your blog posts, and it hit me like so many of your emails just go poof right in the chest. Thank you for that. That's how you know that it's on point. As you say, you're listening to what writers are saying to you and you're really responding to that. At the end, you have to decide, and this is the name of the podcast, right? Part of it is, make art that matters. It's got to matter to you first and foremost. Otherwise, eventually it will never matter to anybody else. Is it worth pursuing for a lifetime?
And I think we come against so many things in culture that make us feel like that's not enough. And these are real things, and they really have an impact on us, to where we feel kind of silly, I mean, that comes back to that writer's guilt. Why am I spending all this time on this if I don't have these outside rewards to show for it, And that's a question all of us have to answer for ourselves, but this book kind of takes the reader through that process. My hope is that, because I struggled with this for way too long, I kind of lived in this world of indecision, where I'm writing every day, I'm submitting, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do to build a writing career, but at the very same time, I've got like one foot out the door. I'm not really sure, is this worth it for me? I don't know if I'm good enough. Does this really matter? Should I really be devoting this much time to it? And, science has proven indecision is painful. It's difficult, it's painful. It's like this piece of lead that you're carrying around. And so I'm hoping to help readers make the decision so they can get past that point a little faster than I did. And then once you reach the place of, I'm a writer, and that's that, which is where I'm at now. Oh man, it's such you have a new sense of inner peace, you have more motivation and energy to go after your goals, you're less buffeted about by what happens with, reviews or sales or whatnot, because you've made that decision and it just feels so good, and I want to help other writers get there.
That's massive. like massive. 1 foot out the door. Oh my God, you could actually see my foot out the door. I know you can admit it. It's so true. Do you know, it was funny just this morning as I was, just getting into the mindset of, I'm about to talk to Colleen. This is going to be great. And just going into that space. And I was procrastinating, of course. And I thought, okay, now stop mucking around. I said to myself, not in the third person, but I will from now on. I said, stop mucking around. If I was my own client and I came to see me and I just sat with myself and I just kind of, tuned in and thought, what's really going on here? And I got some images and then it sort of dawned on me. There was images of me being a child and people not taking me seriously because I'm, pretty goofy. And then my parents not taking my writing seriously, a bit like what we were saying earlier, friends not taking it seriously. But what hit me was, it was me not taking myself seriously, not taking my writing seriously, because exactly what you just said, I had 1 foot out the door. If it fails or doesn't work out or, never gets anywhere, I'm out of there, baby. But in that moment, I thought, but I won't be happy because I love to write for me. And so I did, Colleen. I put my foot in the door, even if it was only for 5 minutes. But now talking to you, I'm going to stick that. That is so powerful. I can't wait till that book comes out.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for letting me talk about it. It's exciting to share it for the first time.
And as you say, life-changing, because once you do decide, and I'm sure you've got a very beautiful process in there, and you do then become committed for your own self, that it is part of your purpose, everything will change.
That is such a wonderful feeling. And unfortunately, it's not something you can do, like we were saying earlier, by just saying, I'm a writer. Yeah, I'm a writer. Let me put the sticky note up. I'm a writer. That doesn't work. It doesn't work just to say it. I've tried it. It doesn't give you that sense of inner peace I'm talking about now. You have to go through the process. You have to consider everything that goes into that decision. You don't have to spend 10 years at it or more like I did. So I'm hoping to help people get through it faster, but it is a process. It's not something that you can just, pay lip service to and think that's going to help you.
Yeah. Well, you're a blessing to share all your learnings with all of us out there in the world who, as you say, you've went through it the hard way and you're trying to help the rest of us not have to suffer and do it that same way.
Well, thank you so much for giving me a chance to talk about all of it. That's always fun. What we're passionate about, right?
We could talk for days on end. I absolutely know it. And we have gone over time. And it's been so fantastic because, you've got the knowledge, but you live it every day. You've gone through it yourself and you talk completely from experience. So all the links to those books will be in the show notes, as well as to Writing and Wellness. That is the website. Yes, you've got a couple of websites actually, haven't you? So you can shout them out now. Tell us them.
Writing and Wellness is my main one, writingandwellness.com. I also have a little site called writerceo.com. It's just kind of a labor of love, but I'm interviewing authors and freelance writers over there that are working to make money with their work. So rather than the wellness angle, we're talking about business, managing your business, marketing books, trying to get different writing projects to earn money with. And I've had several writers on there talking about how they do it, and everybody has like a little different approach. So it's been kind of fun to do. And then my author site.
Yeah, that's a great one.
My author site.
Yes, and your author site.
ColleenMstory.com.
ColleenMstory.com. Check out your books, of course, because you've been writing for a long time. And I love that you've still kept your music up. That's beautiful. And you're quite an adventurous soul. So let's finish up by you telling us you're like this brave adventurer. When I read your bio, I was like, oh, look at her. She gets out there and does stuff. She doesn't just write.
I'm not sure what to tell you about that. What do you want to hear about?
You're on the spot, haven't I, Colleen? Yep.
I mean, it seems like lately we haven't been able to do much of that because of COVID. I'm kind of itching to, I think we're all feeling that way. We're just feeling a little bit cabin fever, we want to start getting back out there and seeing some things and traveling and doing some things. It seems like the last time I did that now has been a while ago. I do have adventures every time I go home and see my parents. They have a goat farm and they raise goats. And so when I go home, there's, especially this time of year, there's babies everywhere, which is a lot of fun to go and play with them. That always feels like an adventure. But I'm hoping for another adventure soon. Right now, it's kind of different, and so hopefully, I'm hoping for this summer to get out and do some hiking. I live in the Northwest, which is Pacific Northwest, which is beautiful country. I didn't get to go to the ocean last fall, which nearly killed me because I usually go every year. It's my writing retreat, and oh my goodness, couldn't go last fall. So I'm itching to do that as soon as possible. How about you? Tell me a little of your area of Australia.
Well, we are actually very blessed because we have 0 COVID cases. Can you believe that? Like actually
Wow.
0 COVID case, which is bizarre to even say that out loud. I feel like I'm bragging again, which I'm not allowed to do in Australia.
Don't do that.
But yeah, don't do that. But because of that, we've very lucky. We're almost back to sort of normal life, and we haven't got the vaccine. I think we've just started rolling the vaccine out, so we're not. Technically, it's not because we're vaccinated. It's just that we did do a severe lockdown, and we're like an island country, so we can limit who comes in, and we managed to get the numbers down to 0. So, yeah, mostly walking, lots of walking, a bit like you, lots of hiking. We are getting a new spa pool in the backyard. Come to my house, people.
Wow.
Which will be a bit of fun because it's like a lap pool with a pressure hose and a spa on one end. But I think
Perfect
it's just
for
that
soothing the muscles after the hike.
Right, and after the writing, all that. But yeah, I find it quite beautiful that we've ended up in our conversation coming back to writing is about a bigger life and about staying well in doing other things as well, not just creating 24 hours a day. Thank you so much for being on the show once again. Go and check all those links, people. And Colleen, pleasure. Please come back on the show
Thank
again
you.
at a later point.
Thank you, Elena.
Take care.
Bye now.
Did you find that interview valuable? Great! Now be an awesome human and go and leave a review because it helps the podcast out so much. Want to read the show notes? Check out thechildren'sbookauthorpodcast.com. Want to find out more about me, Eleanor Page? Find me at eleanorpage.com or come and say hello on social at Eleanor Page Books. Until next time, keep writing and keep learning.